Hello everybody on Instagram and YouTube. I'm Sarah from My Handmade Wardrobe Patterns. Thanks for joining me for the sew along today. Now I am running a little bit late, I'm afraid, because we've had a very exciting morning interviewing some more candidates for our internship, which one of them will be joining us in June to help us develop some more My Handmade Wardrobe patterns. So it's very exciting to be getting a little bit of extra help and some extra hands around the place and some new inspiration as well. So you've joined me today for part 2 of the cardigan sew along. So we're sewing the Edge to Edge cardigan, which is available as a part of our digital online course, Learn to Sew a Cardigan on Your Overlocker. Now, as you can see, I've got my sewing machine out today because I did most of the overlocking last week. If you want to catch up, that video is over on our YouTube, ready to watch as a replay. And yeah, last week I put together the main body of the cardigan. So we got up to this point. So we have a sleeve with a cuff. We have those sleeves inserted into a front and a back, which has been joined at the side seams, and that's the main things that we did last week. I also finished off the hem with this absolutely gorgeous rainbow top stitching, which I just love. It's really, really nice. So I'm going to, sorry, I say top stitching, overlocking. And that's what I'm using pretty much on everything that I make at the moment. I made Edith a pair of leggings yesterday, rainbow overlocking all over. I also made her a little black and white gingham sundress, and I've finished the inside with a bit of rainbow overlocking, just to make it a little bit more fun. So yeah, go and get some rainbow overlocker threads. I would highly recommend them, and you will use them on absolutely everything. So today, like I said, we're going to be doing the parts that we need to do on the sewing machine first of all. So turn that to the side ever so slightly. We have got the pockets. So what we've done with the pockets is we have applied some interfacing to the pocket edge, and that's just to stop it from stretching out as it's sewn and as it's used. And then I've pressed the hem allowance to the wrong side, to the right side actually. So I've pressed the hem allowance of the pocket to the right side, and we're now just going to sew down one edge, just from the very top folded edge down to the bottom, to create the edge finish of our pocket. So I'm using a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance. Okay. I'm going to extend the stitch length ever so slightly because I'm working with a really thick fabric. So as we discussed last week, when you're working with a thick fabric using the overlocker, you need to change some of the settings, like making the stitch width wider and also making it slightly longer. It's a good idea on the sewing machine to make your stitch length a little bit longer. And it just gives the machine a bit more chance to grab hold of that fabric and get it through the machine as it's sewing, if it's got a slightly increased stitch length. And then at the end, back stitching to make sure that's all nice and secured. So what we've done is just sewn from the top folded edge down to the bottom. And now we can turn that through, just nest all the edges in. And you can see that that creates a really nice, neat finish to the edge. No corners poking out, no seam allowances, no rough raw edges or anything like that. So that is now ready to apply to our cardigan. Okay. So looking around for my pins. They are hiding under the other pocket. Okay, so I'm just going to take the front edge of my cardigan And I'm going to line up the pocket edge. So the edge that I haven't finished the top of. So I only finished one edge, one hem here. Didn't finish the other hem. And I'm going to line that up. Oh, forgotten a bit. I need to just run some stitching across to finish off this pocket edge. So just pick this up in a minute so you can see what I'm doing. So I've just put some pins in along like that, and I'm just going to run some stitching across just to make sure that that all stays where I want it to stay. Also, whilst I'm at it, just going to fold in the edge of the pocket. Okay. And I'm going to change to a 3-step zigzag stitch. Now, when you buy the, sorry, that's stitch number 8 on our machines. Now, when you buy the digital course, you'll get a free bonus video which tells you about how to stitch jersey fabric using a sewing machine. Now, the course is mostly focused on how to use the overlocker to stitch jersey and stretch fabrics, but we thought adding in the little bonus video of how to get a really great finish on your hems, on any of your top stitching that you need to do, using the sewing machine was really, really important, because that can be what makes or breaks the garment. Especially as in industry, they have specific jersey sewing machines and machines like cover stitch machines that can hem the garment. A lot of people don't have those at home, but you can create similar effects with your home sewing machine. So that video is included with the Learn to Love Your... Sorry, that video is included with the Learn to Sew a Cardigan on Your Overlocker course. So yeah, you'll hopefully find that really useful, not just for sewing cardigans, but for sewing any jersey garments as well on your sewing machine. Okay, so I've set up with my 3-step zigzag, and we use that because it's got a good bit of stretch and give to it, and these pocket edges will probably be stretched quite a bit. I'm just going to extend the stitch length again because I'm using thick fabric. Just want to make sure the stitch length is nice and long and it doesn't get stuck anywhere. Bring the needle down. Now, you will find when you're sewing thicker fabrics, you have to give the fabric a good nudge to begin with to get it to really start sewing, start stitching. Once you get going, it's all fine. Okay, a little view of what that looks like. Now, if you find that your fabric is stretched out at all, you can just give it a little press on using the iron. I'm actually going to press mine afterwards because I know that this hasn't stretched out too much for me to be able to just bring it back with a bit of steam using the iron afterwards. But yeah, that's what your 3-step zigzag will look like. Nice and neat. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and pop my pocket on my cardigan. Now, if your fabric has stretched out at all, just take care if you've got any kind of grain to your fabric, to just make sure that that doesn't kind of get stretched out at all, misaligned or anything. I'll lift this up in a minute and show you what I've done with the pins, because actually pinning this part is the key to making sure that nothing moves too much whilst you're stitching. Now, if you have got a really, really wriggly fabric, you might find that you want to either baste on the machine or you want to actually hand tack all the bits in place, because things can move a lot when you've got a stretchy fabric. I am just going to use lots and lots of pins for this one. But yeah, as always, if you're ever at all worried about how something is going to work going under the machine, do consider tacking. It'll make a big difference. Okay, so I have applied my pocket like so, and as you can see, I've got my heads of my pins sticking out. Doesn't matter which direction they stick out, whichever direction is easiest for you to remove as you're sewing. But it's a good idea to put your pins in that way, because then you can sew right up to them before taking them out. So that's what I'm going to do now. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm actually going to change my stitch to a regular straight stitch, but I'm going to extend the stitch length to the longest it will go to, which on this machine is 5. So I'm just basting the edges, and I'm going to baste the edge of the pocket down here and the side edge just here as well, just to make sure nothing wiggles and jiggles out of the way. Okay, when I get to the corner, lift up my foot, turn my fabric, pivot. Can't say the word pivot without thinking of Ross from Friends. Carry on stitching. I'm just always checking with this slightly thicker, more wriggly fabric that everything's staying lined up. And that is my pocket basted on. Now I just need to top stitch along this edge. So I'm going to start from the bottom. I'm going to change my stitch length to oh, hi Social Liberty, thanks for joining me. We're just making the edge-to-edge cardigan from our latest digital course. So I'm top stitching the edge, and I'm just going to use the edge of the foot to make sure that my top stitching is consistent. Start off with a little bit of back stitching. Again, I've just gone for a straight stitch, but again, just slightly increased length. The reason I haven't gone for a stretch stitch on this is there's not a lot of up and down stretch in my garment, in my my fabric. So a straight stitch in this case will look neater and it will be just as secure. If your fabric does have a lot of up and down stretch as well as cross-rise stretch, you will want to use a stretch stitch. But like I said, included in the course is a guide to sewing jersey fabrics on a sewing machine. So that will give you all the advice on how to do it and why to do it. Because if you know why to do something, you're much more likely to actually do it. Okay, just come up to the top here, and what I'm going to do at the top here, I've just stitched off one stitch, and then I am going to do a bit of back stitching. I'm going to come forwards again, and then I'm going to go backwards again and make sure that that's really reinforced, because I know that my pockets are going to get a lot of use. I have a toddler. She puts everything in my pockets, and I'm a big pocket user as well. So yeah, I know that if I've got them, I'm going to be using them. Now I've left, let me show you what we've got. We've got the pocket basted on along this edge, basted at the bottom, and then top stitched along this edge. And then I've back stitched right to the top. I have left some long threads. Let's see if I can point those out just here. And the reason for that is that's my stitching across the top of the pocket edge. I'm actually just going to get a needle at the end and poke those through so it's really secure, nice and neat. And that's how I like to finish off anything that I know that I really want to keep quite secure. But yeah, pretty happy with that pocket. It's looking good to me. So I'm going to do the other one later on, just because I don't want to run over too long on this tutorial. And I am now going to join the, no, I'm going to hem. I'm going to hem the garment. So to hem, you need to turn up the hem to the wrong side. Hold on. The cardigan the wrong way up. So you're going to turn up the hem, and I would give it a press if you're near to your iron. I've already given this a little press, and it's kind of folded back on itself, but I can still see the pressing lines that I originally used. So I'm going to go ahead and just stick with those. And I'm going to pop pins in all the way around as well. Take a little time to trim things down right now. Are you a trimmer as you go, or are you a wait till the end and then trim everything? I'd say I'm 50-50 pretty much. I do definitely, when I'm making things like jeans where you're doing a lot of top stitching, I tend to leave all my trimming to the end, because I like to just then decide at that point which bits I'm going to be actually cutting off, or I'm going to be threading in, and I'll just sit in front of the TV, probably with reruns of the Sewing Bee on, and do all my stitching in, make sure everything's really nice and neat. I'm going to actually stay like that as well. I never used to be the neatest of sewers, but I used to get things made quite quickly, and I've completely changed now because I'm wearing my garments so much. I always like to take a bit of extra time over the finishing, over the trimming and stuff like that, because I'm getting increasingly frustrated when the handmade garments that I've made wear out on me, and it's not through having not made them well, actually, it's just through them being worn and worn and worn. So the better I can make the garments, the longer they're going to last me. And that's why making things on the Overlocker is so good, because it really does make a much more durable garment, especially with kids wear. You know what kids are like, you know, they're jumping around, running around all day and bum shuffling and falling over and generally causing havoc to any clothes that they are wearing. And yeah, if you can make them really well, then not only will they enjoy wearing them, and you won't be constantly restitching bits that have come undone, or we're still throwing the garments away. Yeah, you'll be able to hand them down as well. That's one thing that, because we're doing Me May at the moment, and I'm really considering about like why I love making garments, and not just for me, but for my husband and for my daughter. And one of the things that I really like is that I can make garments well enough to then, once Edith's grown out of them, because he grows so fast, to actually be able to hand them down to other people or even sell them on. So yeah, that's very important to me. Right, okay. So for the sake of this demo, I'm just going to hem a little bit of the hem because I'm going to need to put on the other pocket before I finish off the hem. But yeah, just to say, I'm hemming this in exactly the same way as I hemmed the top of the pockets. So I'm changing to a 3-step zigzag stitch. I'm then extending the stitch length quite a bit to 3 millimeters. And then, like I had to on the hem of the pocket, I am having to give it a little nudge. Now, please be really careful when you're doing this, mainly because you don't want that needle to go anywhere near your fingers. But if you're careful, you'll be totally fine. One of the reasons that domestic sewing machine feet have been made a lot bigger is just to make them more safe. So there's not so much chance of your fingers getting caught underneath. That's why if you've ever used an industrial machine, you'll probably have noticed how that's one of the big differences, is that the foot is so much smaller. I'm just going to stitch all the way around to the other side seam. Like I said, I'm not going to finish this off because I do need to add the other pocket before doing so. Just feel a bit ironic making a cardigan on a lovely sunny day like this, but we're still going to be needing them for the evenings for some time to come, aren't we? And a cardigan's such a great thing to just be able to sling on over the top of your summer dresses, your maxi dresses. I'd say my wardrobe is like 60% cardigans, 40% things that can be worn underneath the cardigan. Actually, probably 30%, because 10% is like impractical garments like evening wear and stuff like that just doesn't get a look in these days. Okay. So that is my hem done. As you can see, that's not too bad. It's stretched out a tiny bit, but I know that that is going to be easily fixable using an iron and a bit of steam. It's not stretched out very much, it's just very minimal. Okie dokie. So the next thing that we're doing is adding the neckband to the front opening edge. So that's going to go all the way around. Now, you can already see that this fabric is starting to stretch out a bit. What I'm going to do to prevent anything more stretching out on the sewing machine before I go on to attaching the neckband is I'm just going to put a basting stitch all the way around the edge of my garment. I just want to make sure that it doesn't stretch out any more than it already has. So change back to a straight stitch. Oops. That's there, yeah, that's good. And stitch length. and I'm just running this basting stitch really close to the edge. So it's basically like 5mm away from the edge, and I'm making sure that I'm not stretching the fabric whilst I'm doing it, because that's the whole point of it. And what this does is it just stops any further stretching from happening. Especially around these top edges. I'm very careful about how I do the back neck, because that is where most of the stretching is going to occur. So I want my stitching to basically prevent any more stretching, not hold anything that's stretched out. So kind of nudging the fabric underneath the machine with every stitch. Now, our machine has the option to finish your stitches with the needle down or the needle up. And I always set it to finish with the needle down in the fabric, because then everything's kind of anchored as you're stitching. I think that's quite important, really. So you don't end up with any wobbliness, anything not being controlled as much as it can be. Okay, so that's my basting stitch done, and that will just hold everything. You can't really see it at this point, but just giving my fabric a bit of a stretch, it doesn't feel like it's stretching out as much now. So that's really quite reassuring. That's what I want to be feeling. Okay. Got my thread chains all caught up and it doesn't look quite so pretty, so just trim those bits away. So that's the thing about a cardigan, it's really worth learning how to make it and make it really well, so that the insides look just as good as the outside, because a lot of the time my cardigans are draped over the back of a chair or hanging up somewhere. Because I always like to take a cardigan, even if I'm not going to wear a cardigan to things. So yeah, the insides I think they need to look as nice as the outside, because they're going to be seen. It's like with jackets, front opening of jackets and things. I always think that they need to be as neat as they can be. And yeah, with our digital course, you can obviously learn how to perfect your stitch settings on your overlocker for bulky fabrics and for stretch fabrics and for everything that you're going to need to change settings wise. That's all covered in the digital course. And we've had a fair few people buy the digital course, but we've not had any finished makes that we've seen from the digital course yet. It's a pattern that we included with it was originally something that we did for Love Sewing magazine. It's been hugely popular. It's been our most downloaded pattern from their website, and it has then been a pattern that we've used in workshops very successfully. So we've seen lots and lots and lots of variations of it created. But yeah, we can't wait to see the finished results of the digital course, which we put out for sale a couple of weeks ago. So yeah, it would be great to see your finished makes if you have bought that pattern from us, bought the course from us. So, right, here's one I've prepared earlier, but it's not. So this is the neckband. It's got the little V just at the top, and then at the bottom it's straight. And I've applied jersey stretch interfacing to one side, not to the other because it would be too thick to apply it to both sides. I'm now going to take the neckband and turn it so that the right sides are together, and I'm going to take the end, straight end, and just hem that. So I'm going to stitch a 1.5 centimetre seam allowance hem at the bottom. To change my stitch setting back. Okay. So I've stitched along the end there. Just turn that the right way out. And that creates a really nice, neat end finish to the neckband. Just do the same on the other side. I think that's nice and neat. And then I'm going to take my 2 neckbands, and I've been careful to make sure that I've put my interfacing on opposite sides. I'm going to take my 2 neckbands, and I'm just going to put them right sides together, and then I'm going to stitch along this V from one side, pivoting at the centre and stitching up to the other side. Now, do be careful, again, not to stretch the fabric out when you come to the non-interface side, because you could be lured into a false sense of security with the interface side being stabilised. Then makes it quite easy to stretch out the other side. So when we get to the centre, I'm just going to stitch into there, pivot the fabric, make sure everything stays aligned, and make sure we're not pulling the fabric through the machine. We're just giving it a gentle nudge of persuasion from the front. Okay, there we go. It's all sewn together. So now I'm just going to finger press my seams open, because everything will sit a lot neater if you open up that seam at the back. You can sew that with the overlocker. I personally prefer to sew it with the sewing machine, just to make sure that it's nice and neat. Okay, so we've got our neckband nicely joined. Now at this point, I know it is more sewing on the sewing machine, but I like to run a basting stitch around the whole of the neckband, because you've got these kind of unruly, wiggly, unstabilized edges, and then this stabilized edge. And what you can find is if you try and apply it directly to the cardigan, what can happen is that everything starts to kind of warp and wave a little bit. That is not ideal. So put the few pins in just to make sure, again, we don't get any kind of warping, any kind of, there's a word for it, I can't remember what it's called, something watery, that's not wave. When your fabric gets pushed a little bit in the wrong direction. Right, so going to so again, it's really, really important that I don't stretch the fabric out at this point. It's going to bring it all onto the table. By the way, if you see me flinging pins, I'm flinging them onto a magnetic pin cushion. I'll pop that down here, which is not constantly going like that. It does make it look like I'm just throwing pins straight around the studio. I'm quite untidy, but not that untidy. And then when I'm getting to the top, I'm just being extra careful to make sure that, because I'm going through lots of thick layers here, just to make sure that nothing gets out of line. Because we don't want that happening. So easy for these edges to get misaligned. So do make sure you put in a few pins. Also take them out as you're sewing. Okay, that is just finished basting the two layers of the neckband together. So it now is a lot more manual. Now, if you do that, if you baste them together, it just saves any heartache later on when you come to attach it with the overlocker. And all you have to do then is worry about, or think about, you're not going to worry because if you follow our DRM digital, but you're not going to have to think about keeping all the layers together if you've basted. It means that you can really concentrate on getting the finish just right on the overlocker. Okay, so now it's crunch time. Hopefully not actual crunch time. Now we're going to be sewing through some really thick layers of fabric. So right here, where we're attaching the band, neck band, the front band, to the hem, they're sewing through 1, 2, 3, 4 layers of fabric plus some interfacing. That's thick. So what we're going to do is, you guessed it, baste. So going to start off just by weaving a pin. There's a really detailed video of how to do this, actually. Weaving a pin through the top edge, just to make sure that everything stays really, really neatly aligned. That's really, really important. Okay. Then we're going to find the centre back, and just going to line that up. So to find the centre back, you're just going to take your two shoulder seams and bring those together, and then just mark your centre back neck with a nice big bold pin. So I love these big heart-shaped pins for. You can just definitely see where you've marked, where you've used them to mark. Then I'll take that through and pin the neckband to the centre back there, and then just have a look at how everything's going to fit. Now it's really still quite heavy now, so I need to be very aware that it is feeling heavy, and that means that the fabric is very likely to stretch. So I am very happy that I took the extra time and basted everything as much as I have. With thinner fabric or more stable fabric, you probably find you don't need to do all the basting steps. But if you're ever in doubt, it's really worth basting, because there's nothing as demoralizing as having to unpick your work when you know that you could have done it a bit better if you'd have just taken a few extra steps along the way. That's all fitting beautifully. I think I said it's 4 layers at the bottom, but it's not, is it? Because you've got the pocket as well. So it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 layers. 6 layers. Wow. Like I said, with our hand guide, you can definitely find out how very easily you can join up 6 layers of thick jersey using an overlocker, and it still look nice and neat. Okay. Now, when you're sewing such huge layers of fabric, you're going to need to lift the presser foot up even higher than it would usually go. So I'm just going to pull that up now. Just do a little bit of repositioning for a YouTube. So you can see down here, I have a presser foot lever here. If I lift this presser foot lever all the way up, it will actually go higher than it would just normally. So that's it down, that's it normally up, and then I can lift it even higher. So you've got a little bit more movement there. Now, if I lift that up, you can see I can very easily fit my fabric underneath. That's my little top tip of the day. And if you find that you are struggling to get your fabric to go over thick, bulky layers, you have got a little button on your foot. So press that in, lift up the foot, press that in, drop the foot, which is a bit of a challenge. Press. I'm sorry, I'm trying not to put my finger across so that you can see. I'm just going to press that in, I'm going to drop the foot. And what it does is it actually levels the foot out. So for your next couple of stitches, it's just going to level those out. And that's an absolutely genius thing that's on most modern sewing machine feet. A lot of people don't know about it, but it's very, very handy if you know that it's there. You can also get little devices called hump jumpers. So that is a foot leveling button on the side of the foot. But you can also get hump jumpers, which are a little kind of plastic device. I've not used one myself because I've always just used the button on the foot. But I believe that they can really help with getting over thick layers. Teaching 4 people how to make jeans this weekend in our jeans weekender, so I will definitely be using that button. Sewing thick layers of denim, sewing your pockets on, that kind of thing. It's one of those things when you learn new skills, you suddenly find that you're using them all over the place. And it's like I was saying about sewing jersey fabric on the sewing machine. It's one of those things like, it can be a bit of a bind to buy a course, thinking, I mean, how many times am I actually going to make this one garment? I mean, the truth is, about this cardigan, you will literally make 20. But you can sometimes think, you know, am I getting good value out of it if it's just a course to make one garment? But we always make sure that we include in our courses loads and loads of extra bonus information. So you'll find yourself coming back to the videos when you're sewing other garments as well. So say if you're sewing our 3x3 tees or our jogging bottoms or our soon-to-be released hoodie pattern, you'll find that you will come back to the videos for all sorts of things, not just to make the one cardigan. And it can be so useful to just be able to know where that video is. I mean, yeah, there are so many things out on YouTube. We put loads of content out on YouTube for free, but often finding that information later can take as long as actually, you know, doing the job and practicing it out yourself and trial and error experimentation. So, and you can spend a lot of time watching videos that aren't great as well. I hope this isn't one of them. But yeah, it can be a bit, it can be a bit off-putting, basically. So if you know that you've got videos and digital courses that you can return to time and time again, then that's where the value is. That's what I find. I've got ones that I just go to over and over and over. I find them very useful. Right, fabulous. So I have basted on my front band, and that is neatly concealing all those raw edges of the pocket. So that's looking nice. It's all nice and lined up at the bottom, really neatly. And we achieved that by weaving in that pin at the beginning. And that's a real good top tip. I would say make sure that you get those pins in the right places and baste. And now I feel confident that I can take this to the overlocker with my settings as they were set up last week to sew through my thick, bulky layers, and I can overlock all the way along without it stretching out. That's the key. So let's put that theory into practice. Hello, overlocker. Bear with me while I just switch over a few of the plugs. Okay. Now, because I've used my overlocker for a different project in between, these overlockers do not get announced. I'm going to, of course, test out my fabric. Sorry, test out my stitches on a piece of scrap fabric. Now, I'm going to be overlocking through 3 thick layers. So I've just folded my fabric 3 times. I know at certain points it's going to be even thicker than that, but just for the sake of a test, I'm going to do the 3 layers. Now, as I said last week, sewing bulky fabrics, I've changed my stitch length to just slightly higher. My differential fee is set quite high because I know that this fabric could stretch out as I overlock. My tension dials are set at 4, 4, and then 3 and 3, so slightly lower in the upper and lower looper because that's what worked last week. However, we have all slept since then. Anything could happen, and it's always a good idea to do a test run. So the other thing that we did to avoid anything getting stuck was we removed the knife. So I'm just going to do that. So this is a true practice run. This is a dress rehearsal. I've lost my stitches already. Yes, I have. Okay. So if you hear any clunking or anything like that, it probably means that your lower looper has snapped. And that can be for any reason. That can be because the machine isn't threaded up properly. It can be something getting caught in the wrong place. But it's quite easy to just rethread, just make sure that you go through absolutely every point that you need to. Check that my needle threads aren't getting caught up with each other. No, that's all looking good. Okay, so I can get my needles in the right place, bring out my lower looper using the lower looper lever, and then thread up that lower looper. Now the key here is to make sure that the lower looper head doesn't get tangled with anything. It's not going around itself. And then we sew a chain to check and make sure that that's all looking good. Now, one thing that I quite like to do whenever I'm sewing, again for the first time after rethreading, is just with the presser foot lever, presser foot up, just going to pull the threads from the back just to make sure that they nestle into the tension dials. I'll then put my presser foot down. I'm going to lift it for this just to get the fabric under. And then see how we're doing. So it's looking a little bit loopy. I'm actually just going to lift up the presser foot, change the tension dials, pull everything through again. Okay, that's looking a lot neater. So we had my tensions set looser on the loopers just there, and you can see it's quite loopy. And then I've just tightened them up just here on 3 layers, and that's nice and tight now. So I think, yeah, I'm confident that that is looking nice and tight, not too tight. Okay. Another thing you might want to change is the presser foot pressure if you've got really thick fabric. So I am actually just going to reduce that presser foot pressure down to 1 so that it's really, really not pressing down too much, because I think it could just make my fabric kind of just get stuck, basically, which is something that I really don't want to happen. Now, again, like I showed you on the sewing machine, the overlocker foot will go up ever so slightly more than normal, but it's still going to be quite a struggle to get all this fabric in under the machine. What I'm going to do to start off with is I'm actually just going to do the first few stitches manually. Now, you need to be super careful when doing this because everything can get a bit clunky and chunky quite easily. You don't want any broken needles, that's the main thing. So first few stitches, just doing that manually until I'm confident that I'm okay. And often it really is just a case of being confident about it. It's gone over fine, it looks nice and neat. This is probably the thickest fabric that I've ever used to make this garment. I did make a cardigan out of some boucle kind of teddy fleece, but that was before really I'd become more confident about using the overlocker, and I made a pig's ear. It was a real struggle. But that's where having these courses to follow, it means you're not going to have to go through the trial and error of, you know, what do I need to change? All the information's there for you. And that is such a godsend when you just want to make something and make it well. So let's face it, fabric is expensive. You don't want to be wasting your beautiful fabric making something not as well as you could. So hopefully you can see here the stitching is looking really, really nice and neat. And I've gone with the rainbow thread on the inside so that when people see the outside, they're going to see the insides. When it's hanging on the back of my chair, they're going to see how beautiful they are. Okay, so I've got up to the back of the back neck. I'm going to stop there because I need to put on the other pocket before I continue to finish off the garment. So I'm just going to lift at the presser and continue sewing right there. I think my little scissors have got lost underneath some fabric somewhere. Okay, that gives me a good chance to show you a little technique. So if you bring up the knife, bring up the presser foot, and then you can use the knife. If you just swing the chain underneath, you can actually use the knife to cut off the fabric, the chain, sorry, to release the fabric from the machine. So there we have it. 1/2 of a very thick true knit cardigan. Really looking forward to wearing this. It's going to be absolutely gorgeous. And yeah, finish off the other pocket and apply the rest of the neckband, and we're good to go. I hope you've enjoyed this sew along. Like I said, this is just a little taster of the kind of thing that you will be learning in the digital course. More of an overview of how the garment is made, not the techniques and the details that really make it special and allow you to make it very professionally. If you are interested in the course, you can buy that from our website, from CraftySewSo.com. And it's a great time to buy it because you can buy it now and you'll be able to make cardigans in time for the weekend. It really is that quick. I would say following our videos, it's going to take you about 3 or 4 hours to make a cardigan. So why not buy it today and get started? Thanks very much for joining me. It's been great sewing along with you, and I'm looking forward to joining you again next week. Bye.